some research actually basically found that over 80% of high performance athletes have traits which are narcissistic, psychopathic, and Machiavellian.
It has a lot to do with how we proceed to change things and down the line to the younger rider.
There is funding for these athletes to bring home the medals.
That's where you have the conflict of business and welfare. I may have gone off and then done a slide on psychopaths.
They walk among us.
Yeah. So I warn you of this. Some research actually basically found that over 80% of high performance athletes have traits which are narcissistic, psychopathic, and Machiavellian. So
yeah, well, unfortunately, that's a reality.
In 2023, there was a research piece which basically found very, very close links between psychopathic traits. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're a psychopath.
No, not at all.
But they have psychopathic traits
Yeah.
and high achievement in sport.
Yes.
And it's partly because you have to have an ego. You have to be antisocial. You have to be focused, committed, quite callous, unemotional of others, which are certain traits of that.
Doesn't mean everybody is, but
certainly doesn't mean that everybody is. And you're absolutely right. It certainly doesn't mean that everybody is. But are very that it is. Yeah, my difficulty is then the next question is: should we be trying to emulate these athletes?
Whoa!
Because if those are certain, and this is the problem, is that if those are the traits quite commonly within 80% of high performance athletes, and we are then holding them up as childhood or grandioseness in terms of that we are elevating these people to a position of power and having influence, is that something which we need to actually have a conversation about, and a very deep conversation about? Because what are the ramifications of that on our children and on the kind of next generation coming up through? And that is a very difficult question to kind of go through, and probably needs to go through in its own field and its own subject matter.
But when I saw the whipping video, my thoughts were as much on that young rider who was still a teenager. And my thoughts were on that child is being abused because she's being put through the trauma of being there when an animal is being abused, that she's probably a lot more sensitive than the adults that were there at the time. And yet I may have been the only one talking about that at the time. So yes, when we're training children,
that's a bad case too. The one behind the camera does the same thing. She's but video her too, and it's not a good look.
No, it's not. But to me, I was looking at the child and thinking, well, when I was her age, I loved my ponies. I mean, that wasn't her horse; it was a sponsored horse. So, her horse was not being whipped, which that would destroy me for life. But I was just thinking about, if we're normalizing this coercion of horses in training, then we need to look at the effects that it might have on the young people who are witnessing that abuse, because it's trauma.
Yeah, but it's also that we are emulating you, and that's why I mentioned about some high performance riders are a psychopath. 80% of high performance athletes they have psychopathic traits. And the question comes in is should we actually be trying to lift these people up, and should we be encouraging people to try and emulate them?
difficulty is how to.
How do you
That's
filter it? How do
difficult.
you stop it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to have a bigger conversation about it.
Yeah.
And we should be psychologists, all of us.
That's what I mean. Is that is not my
really.
realm. I'm a geek and a nerd, and I know a lot of things, but
Yeah.
it's not my area of expertise.
It's interesting.
Oh, it's absolutely,
and has a lot to do with how we proceed to change things, and down the line to the younger rider.
Yeah, this is the dichotomy within the equine industry. As you sit there and kind of go, right, you know that there are close links between psychopathic traits and high achievement in sport. But equally, at the same time, we are caring and we are looking after a horse. So there's a dichotomy here, which is why then you start looking at people who have performed certain actions, and you kind of go, oh yeah, there's the unemotional trait coming in there. You know, I'm going to hit you to get the most out of the horse, and I'm not going to have the emotional tag to it, if you see what. And then that's where you kind of go, oh yeah, psychopathic trait, okay. And that's where it becomes quite fascinating. As I say, it's something which is arguably more worthy of talking about within the industry and the greater spectrum of the industry.
Yes.
And I think also there is funding for these athletes to bring home the medals. There's
Oh my God, yes, absolutely, because that's where you have the conflict of business and welfare. Bring home the medals, because all of a sudden then, like the way British, I don't know if you know, but how UK funding works is that it's performance related pay. So what we mean by that is that if your sporting industry wins loads of medals, then you get a bigger portion of the pot, money given to you and money given to your industry. That's how UK do it. Other countries do it slightly differently, but that's why there's an aggressive push to try and get results, because then the industry, or that subsector of the industry, gets a bigger portion of the money, which can then be spent on more and more stuff, if you see what I mean. And it's not always stuff, it's more kind of, oh, that money can then support the world-class start system, or it can support, you know, they just get a bigger pooling of money. So, but that's where, again, you have that conflict between business and welfare.
In Sweden, at least I feel like the equestrian sports are very large, but not funded very well. It's ice hockey and football that comes first here.
Okay.
And that's a shame, because if we compare the costs for those three sports, equestrian sport just skyrockets. Yeah.
It also comes down to the number of kids which you can get into the sport to create the next kind of big athlete within that sport. You know, it's like access, basically. Like in football, every kid has access to a football. There's a very low boundary to getting into the sport. Horse riding, there's quite a big boundary, which is why like me talking about equipment standards and various, you know, all of these types of things, from one aspect they're very important, but from another aspect it's kind of like, well, that's a boundary to the industry. That's another boundary for somebody trying to get into the industry, because suddenly they need to have this certain equipment which is of a certain standard.
Yes.
So it's not always positive, if you see what I mean. I would describe myself as a very fair individual. I try and look at every aspect. So I perfectly understand that if you put in equipment standards, it also runs a bigger potential for limitation, which is why I openly turn around and say equipment standards at the higher end, not equipment standards necessarily at the lower end, because certain standards, yes, like safety and everything like that, but you know, as you go up, you need to have better and better standards, and you can phase in the standards over a period of a decade or over, you know, so it becomes normalized. One of the things, again, going back across all of this, is that we find that there's an innovation slowdown within the industry. And that is because, again, it goes back to generations. You know, people come into the industry and you have a high performance individual in the industry for a long period of time. So if we look at, say, another sport, for example, a high performance athlete might be a high performance athlete for a decade maximum. In some sports, they're only even in their high performance phase for only a year, maybe 3 max. Like, for example, American football, there are certain positions where an athlete is only at their maximum performance for 3 years. There are other sports, cycling, rowing, or kind of football, where they're a high performance athlete for a decade. Unlike riding, where riding, you can be a high performance athlete for 40 years, which is wonderful for the individual. But the problem is it creates what we call an innovation slowdown. Because when you have a high turnover of high performance individuals, and you're only there for a short window of time, the next generation which are coming up through, they're more willing to try new products. They're more willing to look for any advantage they can get. Now, if you have an individual who is there for 20, 30, 40 odd years, you get stagnation of innovation, because suddenly that individual is basically being supported by the biggest companies available. And it takes a monumental effort of innovation to step in and elevate somebody over the high performance individual which is dominating the industry at the time. So you get inadvertently, because there is no high turnover of individual performance athletes, you actually get an innovation slowdown. So products don't evolve as quickly. So that is another big issue and another big problem. How do you solve that issue? Well, actually, you can't. You can't solve that issue, because by the nature of the industry, we turn over the horses, we don't turn over the riders. So if you actually look at the way the horses perform, the rider stays at the top level performance for 20, 30, 40 odd years.
Yeah.
But the horse may only stay there for 2 or 3 years. Unlike every other sport. So that creates a disparity, that creates a problem. So everything just gets slowed down because we follow the rider, we don't follow the horse.
Interesting.
Now, when we start looking at, the rest of the industry, and we all talking about how to improve horses and how to improve the dressage industry, we spend an extraordinary amount of time talking about training. Now, I have sat with some of the best trainers in the world, both human and equine, and it is fascinating when you sit with a human training coach in a very different sport like weightlifting, and you start talking about training. And for example, in weight training, they sit there and go, I don't care about weight training. Weight training means nothing. It's the rest and the recovery, which is way more important.
Way more important.
But you go to an equine trainer and you go, tell me about training. And they will tell you various techniques, methods of training. And you say, okay, what about sleep and recovery? And they're silent. I think, Annette, you are the only person I have ever talked to who actually goes, yes, sleep, rest, train. Like, you're sat there going, yeah,
it's everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are one of the most individuals which have ever actually gone, yes. Because most people I talk to are silent on that, because they don't understand enough in regards to sleep and training of horses. Like, for example, horses only have REM sleep, so rapid eye movement sleep, when they lie down. That's it. They only have REM sleep. Now, REM sleep is really important for memory recall.
Yeah.
So when you're training a young horse, you need that horse to remember the training which you're doing.
Yes.
Now, if your horse is in a stressful environment and it doesn't feel comfortable about lying down because it's always on high alert because it's on a stressful yard, what do you think is going to happen? That horse is not going to remember the training. So all of a sudden, that means and encourages you as a rider to go, oh, you're getting really annoyed and frustrated. I'm going to have to encourage this horse in another way rather than and become a little bit more forceful. So you can, again, you start to understand the logic.
Yeah.
Rather than actually going, actually, your bed is still pristine. You haven't lied down. What's going on? Most horses go through REM sleep in the early hours, in the early morning. Horses are what we call polyphasic sleepers. So they don't sleep 8 hours a day like humans do.
No.
Right? They sleep 20 minutes, half an hour throughout the day, anything from 3 hours to 7 hours, depending on a few factors like age and exercise and so on and so forth. But you sit there with any trainer and they don't get the sleep at all.
It's equally important for the muscles.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's for the brain, it's for the muscles, it's for the physiology, it's for the hormones, it's everything.
Having a first degree in sports therapy, and I would take horses in for rehab. So when I had them, they were stabled with me. I could see them, work on them every day. And yeah, I soon got that good quality rest is everything. So that when we were doing the exercise therapy, I would only exercise them every other day. I wouldn't do it every day because they needed that one day of space and, as you say, assimilation of learning new exercises that I was teaching them to improve their postures. So yeah, a horse should not need to be exercised every single day or trained, psychologically educated every single day. It's that it all happens in the pause, the adaptation does. So with you 100% on that.
As soon as you start taking and understanding sleep with horses and training, you have to slow down.
Yeah.
Once you realize and go, oh my God, my horse is not lied down. It's not sleeping. It's not going through rapid eye movement. It is knackered mentally, physically, and emotionally.
Yeah.
It forces you to slow down.
Yeah.
You know,
you're not doing this speed training.
This actually do mean for us, we train a bit differently from others.
Yeah.
We ride maximum 4 days a week, but when we train, we do it for shorter periods of time, and we ride maximum 40 minutes because I think many horses are injured because people train to the horses are so tired that they just get injured. They break them down instead of build them up.
Yeah,
and I think you saw, Caroline, at the video, even if we do exercises like PF passage, flying changes and canter pirouettes, you don't see our horses sweaty.
No.
We don't need to work them that hard.
Yeah.
They feel their energy and muscles and stamina anyway. And I think it's a better way. But then again, our horses have never been injured. And I think that's because of how we train. Yeah,
definitely. I hope people don't pick up from this that they can leave them in a stable all day without exercise.
Yes.
So
oh no.
They need the turnout. They need a certain amount of exercise, same as humans do, to keep them healthy. So we need to talk turnout as well.
We need to talk turnout. But the thing is you go on social media, you go to any kind of situation, and you always hear about training. You're always hearing people talk about training. Oh, I did this, or oh, I did that, or oh, I'm practicing this, or I'm doing that. You very rarely here, I'm giving my horse time off so it can rest. It's the other side of the coin. It's like my horse isn't sleeping right. I need to make a good, healthy environment for the horse to sleep in. So it is safe, so it is secure. We always talk about the activity. We never talk about the other side of the coin. We never talk about the non-activity, the thing which is actually more important for the body to change. You talk to any weightlifter, any person who's training, they sit there and go, the best performing athlete is the one who sleeps and rests.
Yes.
Like even when I was training at national and international and Olympic level, we were quite literally training, and then we were encouraged to eat food, go to bed. Like go and have a nap for 40 minutes. Then you're getting up and then you're going training again. That was normalized. That was expected. It was not expected that you stayed up and you were awake between the hour and a half, 2 hours between training sessions. I was training 3 or 4 times a day, so it was a bit excessive. But you sit there and go, sleep was encouraged. Now, we don't even have these conversations. And that is fundamentally a problem. If you're trying to correct the industry in terms of dressage, we not only need to talk about training, but we need to talk about sleep and how important it is for a horse to rest and to sleep. And we don't do that.
No. And also, just to add to that, is that unlike, say, for example, hunting horses, they had a season and then they had months off out of season. There is no season of dressage.
No. You've always got these rolling seasons. Yeah,
without even a week or even 2 weeks off.
But that's different here too.
Okay.
Wintertime, we have no competitions. From November to, I think, up here, the earliest competitions is scheduled for February, but they almost never are any competitions done. It still hasn't been any here. And I think April is the earliest. We have competitions during the summer, but then again, people want to let their horses go to pasture in the summers. And when they put the horses on pasture, they don't ride.
Yeah.
And that's clashing, of course. So we picked to do it again a bit differently. We have a winter rest because we train all year round, but we do have at least 3 weeks completely off. We have pretty large paddocks where they go. They have very large area to move around on. And then we have them inside in nights. But then we have also in the summer at least 3 weeks off anyway, so they can rest and, heal and be horses. But we also put in weekly rest, the rest for a week now and then over the year. So we chopped it up a bit, the best way for the horses. They feel their best, and of course, if we see they need rest, they get it. If it's a competition and they need rest, we scratch the competition, and people get pissed. But even if we have paid and made every arrangement to go, and the horse needs rest, we rest them. It's more important in the long run.
Many times our horses would only be rested when they're injured, or certainly that's what you would hear about. As you say, Bradley, we don't talk about rest and dressage horses.
No, not at all.
So,
that's a huge amount of restriction, which we do. But rest and training also sounds really weird because I'm that level of nerd, is that we also need to look at the circadian rhythm of the horse. And this is something which Anette has already started to talk about, because she's like, we have phased training. So we almost like have a wave of training where it goes light, medium, hard, medium, light, medium, hard, medium. So you have this beautiful, by the way you're talking, you already are doing this kind of cycle of training up and down. Unlike the way we train, stereotypically, which is kind of up and just keep going and keep trying to improve and keep trying to improve and improve. And we don't inherently have a cycle. And the reasons why I'm saying this is because there's like circadian rhythms, which is the natural cycle of the body in 24 hours. So I remember you said, Annette, is that most of your training in horse riding occurs in the evening because everybody's at work. Now, in circadian rhythms, the body is more efficient and effective in terms of performance in the afternoon and early evening. So if you want to improve the horse's performance, the best time to do that is in the afternoon and the evening. If you want to lose the horse's weight, then you do it in the morning.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So you have these natural circadian rhythms. So like I sat down with a load of people who were trying to work out how to lose weight on their horses because their horses were obese. I was like, just ride them in the morning. And they started going, what? I'm like, well, because hormonally, it actually makes sense because the various metabolic kind of processes going on within the body, it's going to burn calories and it's going to burn fat more effectively in the morning than it will do in the evening because it's to do with body temperatures and various things like that. And they started doing it and they noticed a massive increase in how the horse suddenly started to lose weight and it wasn't presenting as laminitic and various things like that and kind of metabolic conditions. Yeah. And they were flabbergasted. I was like, well, it's just working with the natural cycle rhythm of the horse. You know, that's why horses, they have REM sleep at dawn because suddenly they can see a predator coming up to them. So most predators are nocturnal. So, okay, so if they're out on the Serengeti or whatever, then lions and lionesses, you know, if you use zebras and lions, they hunt at night. They don't hunt during the day. So zebras and everything like that are more kind of aware and are kind of not nocturnal, but they are more vigilant at nighttime. But yet, comes dawn, you'll see a vast majority of them starting to lie down and rest because suddenly the dawn sunlight comes in and they can start seeing everything. They're much more effective. Now, if we started to work horses in their natural cycle, I strongly believe that you will start to see an increase in performance, but also a drop in injuries, because all of a sudden you're actually working with the horse's body clock essentially. And that is quite fascinating because, like, for example, if you're giving supplements, you should give supplements to a horse in the evening, not in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite logical because imagine you have an office building and your office workers go in and start at 8 o'clock in the morning and they start work. And your cleaners are magnesium, zinc, cobalt. They're all the supplements. So if your cleaners are going in at the same time as your workforce, the office doesn't get cleaned. Whilst if your workforce go in at 9 and finish at 6 and they go to bed, and then you have your cleaners going in at 6 p.m. at night, they can then clean the office way more effectively.
Yes.
And people notice because this is now called chronopharmacology or chronosupplementation, because it's all based on timing of medication and timing of supplements, is they notice that certain medications are more effective at night and certain supplements which are taken at night are more effective, such as magnesium. Magnesium, which is a big supplement in the horse world, which everybody uses for a variety of different reasons, you should take at nighttime. And it's exponentially more effective.
Yeah.
But we don't do this. We don't even have conversations like this. And yet Annette is over there. Yeah, exactly. Yet Annette is over there. You're hoarding knowledge. You're hoarding it all, which is lovely. But this is where we have to have these conversations because we've got to work in time with the horse.
Yeah.
You know, we don't do this. We are implementing human desire and human kind of things. And it's just, you sit there and go, why? You know, you realize, and the more you do this, that you realize that the biggest problem is actually the human, not the horse.
Yes, it is.
And it's us forcing things onto the horse, which is quite bad. But yeah, that's me just kind of going, right, weight loss is best in the morning. Peak athlete supplements should be taken in the evening. body temperature varies throughout the day. So, for example, body temperature, we always think of it as a fairly static number, but actually it's not. It's generally higher in the morning and it's lower in the evening. And weirdly enough, horses need a drop in body temperature in order to go to sleep, just like humans. If you have a hot bath at night, it is not the hot bath which makes you go to bed. It's actually the hot bath which then leads to a drop in body temperature, which will help you then sleep throughout the night. And the same thing happens with horses. If we over rug horses and they are too hot, they then can't sleep, they can't rest, because the horse then can't cool itself down in order to allow the body to go through a cleansing cycle during the sleep process. So this goes back to how we manage horses. We don't manage horses very effectively because we rug horses based on what we feel, not on kind of thing. And that is changing, there is things like that. But
I always thought those conversations with the for rugs and against rugs, look at the horse, does it need it?
Exactly.
It's none of them are good.
No,
what the
they're
horse
not.
needs is the good thing.
I sit on both sides of the arguments, and I generally sit there and go, horses have evolved for thousands of years. I think they know how to regulate their own body temperature. So there are certain, don't get me wrong, there are certain conditions like metabolic conditions where they need a bit more management. I know, doing personal research with PSSM, is that those horses which suffer with PSSM like a warmer environment bodily wise, because it stops the muscles going into contracture and spasm. If they get cold, because their ability to regulate the temperature. So I know that with PSSM horses, they need to be slightly warmer than average to stop them tying up and restrictions and various issues like that. So don't get me wrong, it's not a general broad spectrum answer, but you sit there and go, certain metabolic conditions mean that you have to rug. But if your horse doesn't have a metabolic condition, then it doesn't know how to self-regulate. And if you take it away, if you take a horse's ability to self-regulate away, it then becomes dependent on the rug. So you've created a dependency, which also then goes into another line of research which I did on saddles and rugging. I'm going to be properly geeky here. So in horse hair, they have a tiny muscle which contracts and pulls the hair upright in order to catch air and help as an insulator. Now, if you over rug a horse, that tiny muscle dies. It does grow back, like it doesn't die permanently, but it can grow back. But that tiny muscle dies, which then leads to increased sensitivity and skin sensitivity. And you see where this goes is then that leads to increased potential for rubs where the saddle sits. When you're looking at the saddle, this is me being really geeky here, is that you have to then look at the quality of the hair. You have to look at the quality of the skin. You have to look at lots of other factors which influence your ability to kind of go, okay, how should this saddle fit? But also, what is the material which should go on underneath? Should it be a fluffy pad? Should it be a normal polyester pad? Should it be, because all of those have different, what we call abrasion rates. I have all of the data. I'm so gagged, like sad and geeky, and I have that stuff. And I've had to do it. I've had to understand it.
It's difficult to find those data.
Well, the difficulty of being genuine, like being brutally honest, you won't find that data because they're done by individuals or it's done by companies which don't. We do it individually for our own research, for our own intellectual property or our own intelligence,
or by students who just their research never sees the light of day. Some of it's brilliant.
And the thing is that because it won't be peer reviewed or it's not up to health and safety standards or various things like that, so it will never be for public consumption, which is really frustrating because like I've spoken to some individuals and they were just like, oh yeah, we did that like 6-7 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We already knew that. Like, where can you find it? Oh yeah, no, we never published it. We have no interest in publishing it. There is so much hoarded knowledge, which is just really difficult. And the problem is, it means that people like myself, you end up going over and doing old research, some stuff which has been done before.
I think some sort of standard should apply to every pad you can put on the saddle, like some sort of scale. I mean, not the test results per se, but some sort of indication what we put under our saddles.
Yeah. As I said, me being really, really, truly geeky, what we certainly found was that, you know, like fluffy pads, they weren't particularly brilliant as shock absorption, but yet most people use them as shock absorption. Because essentially when you girth up a saddle, you have a constant compression load going on. You don't have that much extra compression going on. If you have ever been fortunate or unfortunate enough to have your head shaved or part, you know, or part of your body shaved, it becomes hypersensitive. If you then put a fluffy underneath, you also then stop the potential for rubs and where the saddle moves, because the fluff in the numner basically soaks up what we call the lateralization or lateral movement of the saddle on the horse's back. So you don't get those little bold patches on the horse's back.
Yeah. I think every rider that puts a pad under the saddle should take either a wooden stool or maybe just put it on concrete and sit on it for an hour.
Yeah.
Because you feel pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't understand why people don't try them.
Yeah.
For themselves. You gain
totally
a lot of knowledge.
Oh, I totally agree with you. As I say, I'm a big advocate for having some form of standardization. But yeah, any other questions on that one?
I just got one comment going through my mind, is that just backtracking to rugging horses before everyone takes their rugs off their horses and never uses them again. It's the older horse. It depends how much shelter that you offer to the horse, because some have none. And then it's the wind and the driving rain that can cause problems where they cannot have access to shelter. But also older horses who perhaps have joint problems, they cannot run around and keep warm or warm up, they would potentially need something additional.
Oh God, yes, yeah. I've boiled it down into very simplistic terms, but it's way more complicated than that, because it depends on wind speed, it depends on humidity, it depends on it sounds really weird, but it also depends on the angle of the field and which way it is pointing. If it's south facing, if it's north facing, if it's east, if it's west. It also, weirdly enough, it also depends on the type of soil you have as well. Because you've not only got weather conditions and various things like that, but you've also then got the different soils which have an impact on movement of the horse. So if the horse is on particular clay where it's all slippy or anything like that, they may not be moving around as much, because you get the drag on the heels and the foot and everything like that. Whilst compare that to something like sandy soil, which drains really, really well. The horse may be slightly older, but it will be moving around a little bit more because it can. So rugging is way more complex than that, even to the extent of even in the stable and the type of stable you have. Because the way we orientate our buildings, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to go off and be really geeky again, but historical buildings for horses, I can't remember if they were designed west to east or east to west, but they were designed for airflow. They were always designed for air to just cycle through the building. Now we put up buildings for horses which is more positioned for aesthetic or efficiency. So I'm going to put a building in a certain position because it's more efficient to have a building there under the trees and everything like that, because we don't use that area, or it's acorns or whatever. So we position buildings now completely differently. And because we position buildings differently, generally under trees or anything like that, we then increase the potential risk of mold growth and various other issues, which can then lead to breathing conditions like asthmas and various things like that. Whereas old buildings, the building would be in the middle of the field, weirdly enough, but it would be pointing, I think it's west to east. I can never remember. But it's basically just pointing in the direction of the wind blowing down through the land or off the land and channeled through the building. But then, humans come in and we try and block it all up, and we think, right, we want it all nice and warm and snuggly for horses. And actually, no, you need the airflow to remove mold spores, to remove all of these types of aggravants. And that has an impact on rugging horses as well.
It's prescriptive, the same as saddles, isn't it? And so much of what we do with horses.
I have a little bit colder up here than you have.
Oh God, yes, you've definitely.
Last winter we had like minus 38 degrees Celsius.
But also, you're a lot drier, aren't you? As well, you don't have.
We live beside the coast.
Oh, wow.
We have very moist here.
Interesting point is it sounds really weird because I'm so geeky. In racing industry, when you had a horse which had a breathing issue, they used to ship horses down to the coast because the salt air helped with their breathing and helped with the airways.
Yeah,
and it was quite a common therapy for the racing industry to have a horse which was having a breathing issue, to then spend a couple of months down near the coast training and exercising, but around sea air because of the salt.
Yes.
Which is the reasons why a lot of the salt therapy has now increased, and why people like doing salt therapy on horses, because it helps with the air. But it was way back when that was how racing yards used to get round breathing issues in horses. They used to basically just ship them down to the coast to carry on training. So if you're near the coast, your horses are going to be, there's a constant airflow, there's salt in the air. That's brilliant.
Yes, it really is.
Exactly. When you start looking at rugging and all of that, there's so many worlds you kind of have to kind of attach to it. But yes, so I apologize. I go off into a tangent. But
that's great.
So going back to the original problem or solutions, which we've kind of looking at in terms of trying to solve the dressage industry and trying to help elevate it and support it. This ties into what we were talking about, psychopaths and kind of the influence of the older generation onto the younger generation. We've got to look at things like social media influence, something which is relatively new in the last kind of 15, 20 odd years. The problem is with social media is that we've all seen enough papers and articles which are all writing about the negative impacts or the positive impacts of social media on individuals. But the problem is that generally social media perpetuates narcissistic behavior. And I'm going to say that with the brackets. Okay. It doesn't mean that you're narcissistic. It perpetuates or increases narcissistic behavior. Okay. Primarily because it forces us to compare ourselves to others. Okay. So when you look at social media, you're looking on Instagram or you're looking on any of the social medias and you are seeing somebody else perform, and you inherently will start to compare yourself to them. So it forces you to do that. And then it also forces you to reevaluate our personal situation. Because by looking at somebody riding and creating an inherent judgment on their riding or on their management of the horse, that then forces you to then reevaluate how you ride, how you manage your horse, how you kind of do things. So you can see how social media, positive or negative, increases the likelihood or increases narcissistic behavior. Doesn't mean you are narcissistic, doesn't mean that you are being you have narcissistic traits, but you are encouraged to compare.
I think of it as inspiration.
Absolutely. And that is a very positive take on it.
Yeah.
But, and that's because of your individual psychology and everything like that, which is lovely and wonderful. But
And horrible.
no.
But I'm free speaking. I say what I feel.
Yeah. But the difficulty is that social media forces you to do that. And that's the difficulty with social media, is that you may not want to compare yourself. You may not want to reevaluate your personal situation, but as soon as you go on social media, you are forced to do it subconsciously.
I think also there seems to be an upsurge in anonymous comments now, or anonymous posters, where perhaps people before, they may have been okay with revealing who they were. Now there's a lot more posts that are anonymous because they're not as comfortable about being judged. I'd also want to say as well, in terms of speaking for the horse, that very popular group on Facebook, the SH1T eventers, which is hugely funny. It's so funny. And riders are hugely self-deprecating, but I think that sometimes the horse comes off worse, as if the horse is the idiot, the horse is useless, the horse can't do. And it's funny, but some of the posts are a bit near the mark for me.
But this is the influence of social media. We've got to understand the influence of social media, and then once you understand it, you kind of go, okay, how do you help it? How do you support it? How do you involve it positively? And as Anette said, she looks at it as inspirational. And that's wonderful if you have positive feedback and you have positive role models, and they are in line with your ideology and your thinking and your thought process. But
because we can select
absolutely. But you also get the negative as well.
And I think,
like, I will personally say, when I saw the video of the whipping event on my feed, immediately after was things for PETA, things like dog abuse, things like animal abuse. Suddenly my feed, I clicked on the video once and I watched it from beginning to end, and then all of a sudden my feed changed. So I then had to basically click on happy things like multiple times to kind of just get rid of all of that. But that's how quickly algorithms work. And that's where, as I say, if you've got a feed which is lovely and positive, that's lovely, it reinforces it. But you also get suddenly people clicking on stuff, and it can actually be quite negative.
I think the danger of social media, if you think about comments and such things, that people comment and they are hard on what they think. And when you try to just get an answer to how they come to those decisions about how they feel, they are riding at home on a horse on long reins, on the forehand. Horses are injured. They don't have any sort of comprehension about what it takes to actually train a horse and to have them in a way that they are healthy and keep them happy. And I think that's a big gap there. And I think that's a real danger on social media. These people gain attention and they are unawarely doing bad for their horses. But they don't know about it. So I think it's also a problem.
I will certainly say that On social media, things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, not so much Instagram because you don't get so much writing, is that when you write a piece or you write a response or anything like that, the written word is so open to interpretation. Whereas when people hear you talk and they hear your tone, your inflection, your kind of how you're trying to put the information across, I think I think people come across better in vocally rather than in the written word, because I think when you write something, you may mean it in a certain tone, but the person who's reading it may read it in a very different tone and take a very different interpretation. Case in point is how sometimes we communicate with our partners. We may respond in a certain way via text message, and then your partner may read it and interpret it totally differently. And you're sat there kind of going, no, I meant it like this, and you've gone way over there. And that's a genuine human thing. So I think when you're looking at the written word in social media, you've always got to remember the tone and the inflection of how it is meant to be. Now, because I wasn't allowed on social media because of my personal status of being a therapist for high performance individuals, I wasn't allowed on social media for basically 15, 20 odd years.
You.
Yeah. So that all passed me by. I started to go on social media, and I was basically, that was a shock. And that's where I very quickly learnt that actually written words, people basically put their own inflection on it. So I had to stop writing because I was like, I genuinely mean this from the kindest perspective possible. I don't mean this from a negative perspective. And that's why then talking and people hearing me talk and listening, suddenly people were like, oh, you're actually talking in a very positive way, and I now understand what you mean. And I think that is a major downfall of social media, is that we put our own inherent bias or personal expectations of various things like that onto social media, and we can get quite aggressive.
People expect us to answer aggressively.
Yeah. Genuinely,
so even if you do nothing to mean harm.
But you don't even have to write now. This business of liking, loving, crying, being angry, all those,
even like emoji.
And also social media can very quickly divide people. So you can see who's done this liking, loving, etc. So that these idols that were behaving badly, I was shocked to see my peers. So a therapist liking, loving, hugging, caring for horse abusers. I'm like, what? You can't, even if maybe you do feel empathy for these abusers, why would you go on social media as an equine therapist and show that you like somebody like that? So and that to me, I thought I wanted to delete them all from my friends list, because I thought you can't be a therapist and love and hug an abuser, a horse abuser. That bit of disconnect there for me. So that's one of the things about social media. You can divide people quite quickly, and you can perhaps get a bit too much information. But then again, that person, that therapist, may have had some sort of connection, business connection with the abuser, which said, well, I better support my line of income.
This is what I mean, and that's why I was saying is social media, positively or negatively, it does perpetuate certain behavior types, which we have to be aware of.
And it comes back to the children,
it comes back to children, and it comes back to generational influence. It comes back to marketing, and how companies market, and so on and so forth. So this is why it's kind of going full circle. You can't look at one entity and go, right, that is the golden thing which we must change. Go on.
Competition-wise, social media with all its comments, what do we expect from the competition horse? To be accepted on social media with a horse. You can never ride with spurs. You can't use a double bridle. You can't touch the reins. You can't sit leaning back. You can't sit leaning forward. You can't jog with your butt, making it walk faster. If the horse opens its mouth for 1 second, it's bad riding. Or if it swishes the tail, it's bad riding. I mean, somewhere we need to recognize that the horse is living. It must be allowed to open the mouth. You can't expect a horse to go for a 5-minute program with the mouth completely closed. It's not natural. The mouth should never be clamped down. It's not natural. It must be allowed to have its mouth slightly open. If you're lucky, you have a horse that has lips that cover this. But a horse with small lips, these top riders never choose a horse with a small mouth, with small lips, with mouth. It's never far down. They want it up. They want big mouths. They want big lips to cover that. That natural behavior that we call abuse because the horse opens its mouth. If I touch the reins and the horse, maybe it's not prepared. Or maybe I touched them too much, or it was looking at something else at the time. I mean, the horse can even be reacting to something outside the court, or horses look at things. They are prey animals, and we don't allow it. I mean, of course, if you ride and you are in Grand Prix competition or any competition, the points should be down, because if the horse is through the body and mentally engaged and relaxed and everything in the best way possible, it wouldn't gape. But is that even a reality? If we expect that, the riders will clamp down with a noseband, not show it. So, I mean, we need to find some sort of balance here.
What you're talking about is the fear of judgment. You know, people are just scared. They're scared of being judged. So they clamp down. They clamp down the nose. They clamp down. And you're absolutely right. We need to be kinder to horses, and we need to be kinder to observing horses. Opening their mouths doesn't necessarily mean a negative. I think it would be kind of funny if somebody did a video of a horse, and every single time social media had a negative expectation, i.e. swishing the tail, there was like a big red buzzer or something like that just went off every single time. Because you'd sit there and kind of watch any horse and go, buzz, 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 buzz. Because horses move. They swish their tail naturally. They open their mouths. They flick their ears. They're
Me and my daughter, we chose to have our nosebands very loose. I mean, not loose so the bridle can twist around if anything happens. But we can get 2 hands. We can put both hands on top of the noseband, inside of the noseband. And that means that the horses can open their mouths. And it may not look very nice sometimes that they do that. But I feel that the training and the relaxation of the horse should gain more softness in the mouth and jaw. So it get more consistent. But I chose not to pull it tight just for others to see, they don't open the mouth. But now we're coming to a point where it's abuse if the horse opens its mouth. I think it's abuse if they can't open their mouth. I don't know. I feel conflicted about that. And I mean, blue tongue, that shouldn't even be red card. That should be exclusion from the competition at hand.
Well, and massive thanks once again to Anette Karlsson and Bradley Whale for sharing their your uniquely detailed insights, so much detail there, of this critical topic, of which there's more. And thank you very much to the viewers who
survived this long.
have survived, persevered. Personally, I've just found it so highly engaging. So if you're with us, if you're still with us, thank you very much. And all comments are welcome. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah.